Order, members. Order. We come to questions to the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister, and we will start with topical questions which will last 15 minutes. And I call Ian Millen.
In light of Judge Tracy's judgment on Friday that said Minister Spitz's decision to ban blood donations from gay men is irrational and in breach of the ministerial code, what steps will the First Minister, as the DUP nominating officer, take on this matter? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, unlike a lot of the people who have been commenting on this issue, I've actually read the judgment and read it several times. He, of course, does not say that a decision to ban MSM blood is irrational. He indicated that the irrationality came from banning it in Northern Ireland but allowing a small quantity to come in from outside of Northern Ireland. That, of course, could be rectified if the Minister so chose. He had, however, two other grounds, both of which I think the Executive is going to have to look at. On the constitutionality issue as to whether there was a power for the Minister to take such a decision, I suspect, no matter what the Department may ultimately decide whether they appeal or not, I suspect the Department of Health in Great Britain may well appeal the issue, because there are devolution issues at stake here as to whether the powers that are given to the member country can be devolved, which was assumed to be the case. And that's an issue quite separate that has to be considered. The other issue, of course, which is in breach of the ministerial code, these provisions were provisions that were put in during the negotiations by my party. They have been discussed on a number of occasions at executive meetings, and we have taken advice from time to time from the Attorney-General. There has been a general view on the part of the Executive that if we were to carry them to the level that Mr Justice Tracy carried it to, that literally everything would come to the Executive. No spending decision, no individual decisions by Minister could happen. They would all have to come to the Executive Committee, and I think there are very major difficulties in doing that, and I think the Executive is going to have to look at that issue as well. But it is very clear anyway that any significant major decision that is taken that is controversial should come to the Executive Committee, but no member of the Executive Committee asked for this to be discussed.
Ian Millen, supplementary.
And I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer thus far. But does the Minister accept Judge Tracy's and agree with Judge Tracy's ruling on this matter?
You're trying to get me into trouble. I think that those are obviously matters that can be considered by those from a legal background. If the Department does not agree with it, then it can appeal that judgment. In terms of the ministerial code, I had been more content and felt that the Lord Chief Justice's ruling on that matter was a sensible judgment, in that he indicated that if there was a then it would be raised at the Executive Committee. That meant that only, if you like, the nuclear issues would start coming to the Executive rather than every single issue. Because if every single issue is brought to the Executive, then there is no minister in this House will be able to take any decision on their own. They're all going to have to come through the Executive Committee. So before people start cheering to the rafters about this issue, they should think of the ramifications of the judgment.
Joe Byrne. Mr. Byrne.
Mr. Speaker, would the First Minister agree that the ongoing protest camp at Twadell Avenue is causing major concern in that neighbourhood? And what would the First Minister and indeed the Deputy First Minister jointly hope to do to try and resolve that situation for those neighbourhood people there?
Well, of course, there is disruption, I have no doubt, to people in the neighbourhood, and I have no doubt that it puts additional pressure on the PSNI of the additional work that they have to do. But we do defend in this country people's right to peacefully and lawfully protest. And as long as protests are carried out peacefully and lawfully, then those of us who are part of a democratic institution should be content to support their right. In terms of what we are doing about it, the Deputy First Minister and I brought in colleagues from the leaders of other parties We recognised that there were some outstanding issues in relation to parades and flags in the past that needed to be resolved. We therefore came together and agreed that Dr Richard Haas should facilitate and chair an all-party group that would look at those outstanding issues, and those are the very issues of the protest campaign at Twiddell. I urge everybody to remember that they have to uphold the rule of the law, they have to cooperate with the PSNI, and they have to abide by the conditions that are laid down. But I do protect people's right to protest, providing they do it lawfully and peacefully.
Joe Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the First Minister for his answer. Would the First Minister agree, however, that given that the Haas talks process has started, that the business community in Belfast are very concerned that there might be more protest parades in the city coming up to the festive season, and what words of encouragement could he give to people to make sure that protests do not end in disruption and cause havoc to the shopping community?
Well, I would sympathise particularly with the traders in Belfast who had a very bad period around Christmas of last year. And when we talk about rights, there are, of course, competing rights. There's the right of people to carry out their daily business, whether that's in businesses or whether it's going in to carry out commercial activity in the centre of Belfast. And people carrying out activities in terms of protests have to take into account the rights of others and of the wider society. I have heard of some proposals to hold protests leading up to the Christmas period. I hope people will reflect on the damage that would cause to Northern Ireland and to traders in Belfast, potentially leading to a loss of jobs. The protest in Twiddell Avenue will not have that impact, but certainly if protests were brought into the centre of Belfast, it has that possible outcome.
George Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the First Minister on the highly successful investment conference held last week in Belfast?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the member has probably used the two words that do sum it up, which is highly successful. Of course, the ultimate success is in outcomes. It's in actually being able to tie down the jobs that would come to Northern Ireland and the level of investment that would come. Both the Deputy First Minister and I have been involved now in 3 investment conferences. Back in 2008, then the Washington Investment Conference, kindly organised by the United States administration under then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and then this one. And we are both agreed that in terms of the contact that we have had with investors, this is by far the most successful conference that we have had. The response was very positive from those that we spoke to, both on the Friday evening or the Thursday evening in Hillsborough Castle at the dinner. And some people, I noticed the BBC talking about wining and dining and so forth. I have to say that it is that kind of networking that really does get you a connection with business people. It is the opportunity for you to find out what projects various companies are looking at and therefore how we might fit into their needs and requirements. And at that dinner, we spoke to a number of people, both the Deputy First Minister at his table and me at mine, spoke to people who were looking at Northern Ireland as a possible place for investment. And the encouraging thing the next day was to find that a lot of those companies who had Northern Ireland on a shortlist were indicating that Northern Ireland had now leapfrogged to the top of their shortlist. The investment conference was. The Deputy First Minister and I went down to Invest Northern Ireland's offices this morning to thank the team who had worked so hard, and we give due recognition to Alistair Hamilton and his team for the preparation and for the work that they carried out.
Mr. Robinson.
Could I thank the First Minister for his answer? And could I ask the Minister, during the course of the Prime Minister's visit, did the First Minister have an opportunity to raise the issue of much-needed DVA jobs in Coleraine?
Mr. Speaker, yes, I gave an assurance when I was down in Coleraine and met with the workers that I would raise it with the Prime Minister. And both the Deputy First Minister and I spoke to the Prime Minister about this in the private meeting that we had with him. We presented him with an aide-memoire which gave background details of the case, and he has indicated that while there is presently a consultation on, he cannot obviously give any definitive remarks, but will make contact with us closer to the time when a decision is being taken.
Michaela Boy.
Can I ask the First Minister what measures has OFM DFM in place to ensure the appropriate level of cooperation between the Victims and Survivors Service and the Victims Commissioner to ensure full compliance with all statutory requirements?
Well, I'm grateful for that question, because I have noted, as no doubt the member has, that there have been some remarks made more recently on that subject. We have arranged within the department to bring together the Victims Service and the Victims Commissioner with some of our own people, and we'll talk over those issues, and hopefully we will get them resolved. So action is already underway.
Can I thank the Minister for his answer? Can I ask, is the Department and Ministers satisfied that the needs of victims and survivors will be acknowledged and addressed as a result of the measures adopted by the Department?
Well, these are the kind of issues that must always be constantly under review. None of us should be complacent on these matters. If there are specific issues that the Victims Commissioner wants to raise, and I understand she made some comments during a committee hearing, we will want to hear what it is that the Commissioner feels that the service has fallen short in, and we'll be happy to talk with the service about how those needs can be met if there is some shortcoming. We are in no ways complacent. We don't believe that we have yet reached the level of perfection which would allow us to sit back. So constructive criticism is something that none of us should run away from. So let's see what the issues are, and let's see how we might resolve them.
Mervyn Storey. Mr. Storey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following on from the First Minister's comments at the opening of topical questions, could he return to the issue and indicate to the House what implications he believes the Tracy judgment has on the executive business?
Well, I noticed that one comment that was made was that on the foot of Mr. Justice Tracy's judgment, everything that's in the in-tray of any will have to be transferred to the departmental in-tray of the Deputy First Minister and myself. That's not a position that I think we want to find ourselves in. We have to obviously work out where the bottom line is in terms of what it is important for the executive to deal with. Any other executive will deal with major issues. Under the basis of Mr. Justice Tracy's judgment, we would have to be dealing with every funding application, the division that the Education Minister or the Roads Minister or the Housing Minister might make in terms of where they are going to have schools, hospitals, houses, roads, etc. And those are issues that we have left at a departmental level. And of course, even lower level issues would have to be decided by the Executive Committee. So it would be a very considerable burden on the Executive if we were to go down that particular route. Of course, we always knew, and the law is very clear on it, that decisions which are controversial, decisions which are significant, decisions which are cross-cutting should come to the Executive. But I thought we had an understanding that in those terms, if there was something that any of the Executive members believed that fell within those categories, they should ask for those matters to be brought to the Executive. And of course, it isn't just the Executive will have a role in these circumstances. Not only do we now find that the general public through the courts would have a role, but of course this Assembly has a role as well, because any 30 members can require an issue which they believe to be controversial, significant or cross-cutting to come to the Executive as well.
Mervyn Storey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the First Minister for his reply. Just to tease that out a little bit further, is the First Minister then giving an indication that there are implications following on from the Tracy judgment, specifically in relation to issues of concern in education, which are very rife in the community at this minute in time, specifically around the future of the Dixon Plan and also in regards to the common funding formula?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that the Tracy judgment has any additional impact on those particular issues, because I think that was something that was already required under the previous judgments. And there's been several judgments that have been given in and around the issue of the ministerial code and the requirement to bring material to the Executive. The Tracy judgment goes, I think, beyond anything that we have had to date. That's why I think the Executive has to look at the issue. But clearly, whether it's a common funding formula or whether it's the Dixon plan, those are issues that are controversial. There's no doubt about their controversy. They're also cross-cutting and therefore would have to come to the Executive anyway.
Order, members. Order. That ends the...